Welcome to episode 50, 100 Things to Happiness and Feeling Alive, with special guest Sebastian Terry. Welcome to Alive by Design. My name is Blake Mallon, and we're here to bring you inspiring people, principles, and practices to help you wake up, move toward your meant to, and feel fully alive. Open your mind and let's dive in. Hey guys, before you listen to the podcast, I just wanted to say I really appreciate you being here, and I'm super excited about this new quarantine conversation series. If you want to catch these episodes happening live, where you often can ask real-time questions or maybe even get featured on the show, make sure we're connected on Instagram at Blake Mallon and on my Facebook page, facebook.com/BlakeMallon.page, as I'd love to see you there. Love you guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and enjoy the episode. Looks like we're ready to rock. So I appreciate all of you guys, and let's go ahead and get tonight's conversation started right now. And I want to open up with a question, and this is a real question for all of you. Have you guys ever had a point in your life where something hit you and you just questioned like everything? You questioned who you were, what you were doing, what you were meant to do. Have you ever been at a point in your life where you find yourself just asking the question, like, am I really happy? Is this all that's really meant to be? And ultimately, from those maybe questions, what, if anything, can you do to change that? How many of you guys have been in that place before at some point in your life? Maybe it was a while ago, or maybe with everything going on in 2020 this year, maybe you've had a few of those moments at some point through this year. And the reason I ask those questions, guys, is because the story we get to hear tonight, and a special guest that I'm just honored to introduce to all of you and share with all of you, his story is one of that. And I'll let him go into it, but just so you have context at a high level, I'm going to introduce you to someone tonight named Sebastian Terry. He's a name you may know, and after tonight's conversation, you're going to want to know. And Sebastian had an incident in his life, a tragic event happened that I'm sure he'll go into, that found himself asking those questions, found himself saying, like, is this really it? You know, am I really happy? And, you know, it ended up inspiring him to do something that's maybe different than any of us have ever done in that same spot. And it inspired him to take kind of an immediate and a massive action where he stepped back and something just compelled him to start writing a list of 100 things that he wanted to go do in an attempt to find the elusive happiness, an attempt to make himself happy. And what's interesting about Sebastian's story is he spent the last decade, literally over 10 years, going out and checking things off this 100 thing list. And what started out as just kind of a crazy adventure, kind of a personal pursuit, has now transformed, guys, into something that's truly special. I mean, I've watched it over the last couple of years really become really a movement that's inspiring hundreds of thousands of people. His message has already reached, and it's inspiring people to wake up. It's inspiring people to, you know, accomplish big goals, go after big goals, and inspires people to do it in a way that not only accomplishes dreams, but does it in a way that gives back and makes an impact. And tonight's conversation is going to float between a lot of concepts that I know are going to hit home. I know we're going to add value, and I know it's something the world needs right now. So with that, guys, it is my privilege to bring us live from Venice, California, for all of us tonight, Sebastian Terry. Sebastian, are you out there?
I am. How are you doing?
Looking good, brother. Bueno. I like the hat.
Yeah, I don't know what it means, but I like it. It's good.
It's good. Well, it's good to see you again, brother. I know we recently reconnected, and it's been a minute, I think. When I'm really bad at time. We were kind of in dialogue, and I first heard your story. Was that maybe 2-3 years ago, 4 years ago? Do you remember when that was?
No, I was actually saying this to my girlfriend yesterday that I'm awful with time frames. So I don't know. Definitely longer than a year. But I remember it well, and it's so nice to see you again. I found it horrible having to wait offline as you're doing that amazing intro, by the way. But
I know. You're sitting there going, I appreciate you, brother. I mean, it's an inspiring story, and, you know, I'm a fan. So I first learned about your story on an ESPN clip. So I saw, and I know it was one of the big ESPN shows, and they did kind of a full highlight on your mission. And I remember that clip, I think, went super viral a couple years ago, and I found that. And then I went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and I found your TED Talk. And I remember it very distinctly because I'm like, this guy is saying exactly what I feel in such like an articulate way, and your actions were just inspiring, brother. So I just want to say, thank you for all of that.
Hey, well, I'm very flattered. And I mean, yeah, like you say, no doubt it resonates with you because I've seen your TED Talk, flipping the script. And yeah, I mean, we're in control of our lives. And so, and for those people thinking, that guy doesn't look like an athlete, you're correct. What was he doing on ESPN? I don't know. But I did have a little feature on there, and it was lovely. And I was like, I think it was like 20 million views.
Just something like a little 20 million views, crazy. And it's great because I heard Sebastian's story. It hit me deeply. I said, I want to know this guy at the very least, just to have a relationship. And I reached out to Sebastian on Instagram. Love, platforms today. We can just get connected. He replied, we started talking, and Sebastian, I appreciate you. I know you came out and spoke at one of my community's events, and I've heard you share your story, from the stage in like a keynote version, but I'm super stoked that I kind of get a little time with you tonight in a casual format, a personal format to kind of peel back the layers and dive a little deeper. So, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, super fun. I remember that it was a great time in Vegas, and your community, as you say, were so lovely and so supportive, and I'm in touch with some of them still. And I think any opportunity to share a story and hopefully have a positive imprint with somebody is I'm just very grateful for it. So for anyone listening, thank you for being here. And great to see you. I I kind of feel like it was probably 3 years ago when we were catching up, and I got to share that story on stage. But a lot's happened since then too. So I'm excited to kind of just share and brainstorm with you. Really, just what a conversation.
Let's dive in. So, I have so many places I want to go in the time we have. I definitely want to, talk about the list and get people to understand what that means. I for sure want an update on your list because I know there's some movement there. I want to talk about what you're seeing as it relates to 2020 and some of the new projects. But before we get into kind of all of that, I just think it's worth catching everybody up who maybe isn't as familiar with your story on however much you want to kind of go into that what inspired this whole unique movement and kind of where this all began, if you'd be willing to share.
Of course, yeah. So I'm assuming that nobody knows me, which is normal. I love that. So yeah, look, I'm completely average, and as you say, I experienced a loss when I was about 24 years old. And lots of people out there do. And I remember, like everyone else, it's a very common thing. I lost a friend. I was 25 years old. He was 24. His name was Chris. We did everything together. School, played rugby, rode surf boats back in Sydney, where I'm from. I'm Australian, for those who can tell. And it was a moment where I asked a lot of questions that we all do in those situations. What am I doing? Who am I? Whatever it is I am doing, am I doing it well? And I just became really lost. And there was one hypothetical that jumped into my head at that moment. And it was this. It was, if Chris had another chance to live his 24 years again, would he do the same things or would he change everything? And I think ultimately the question was, was he happy? And I thought about it for a moment, and I obviously couldn't ask him, but I thought about the way he lived his life. And I think he lived really well. He loved the beaches. He loved his friends. He loved sport. He loved being a big kid. And rightly or wrongly, by anyone else's code, he lived a life that reflected his genuine, values, let's say. And I thought it was a life far too short, but one, as I said, really well lived. And then I turned that question, that hypothetical, on myself. And I thought, if I was going to die today, I look back at my life, could I say the same thing? That I wouldn't change a thing because I was really happy with how I'd been living. And it was the first time I'd ever looked at my life from that perspective. And almost instantly I realized that I would change everything. And that was, I guess, a big slap in the face and quite confronting. And I didn't know what to do. And then I just thought, well, if I want to be happy, I just need to do things that make me smile. So I got a piece of paper and a pen and, I just began writing down a list of things that I thought would quite simply make me smile if I tried them. And that was the beginning of what is, of course, now known as the list, or my 100 things list, as a plane goes past. And and it was just a very personal journey, and it's kind of kind of just gathered momentum somehow. And of course, with social media, there was no strategy behind it, by the way. ESPN or any of, like, I have a TV show or reality show and books and all that kind of, it just happened. I got no idea how it happened. And it was just nice. It was just really nice. It seemed that my story resonated with everyone else in that we all want to be happy. And I just ended up being an example of that, I suppose, in its simplest format. So I wrote down this list, I looked at it, and I thought, I'm just going to prioritize that. And I decided to. So I dropped everything in my life to pursue it. And I've done a few weird things. And of course, just quickly, I need to say this, it's no longer about me. It's about a community. And that's just a beautiful thing. We'll get into it, but yeah.
I love it. And every time I hear you say that, I smile as an entrepreneur. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs that are watching this or will listen to it on the podcast that are like, wait. There's no strategy. There's no business plan. There's so many people that have a mission they're so passionate about that try so hard and spend so many years. And I love, Sebastian, he's like, well, he went out there, took action, was the example, and had a video get on ESPN, go viral to 20 million users, get picked up by a TV show, got a book out, get asked to speak. It's just crazy to me. But I will say, when I met you for the first time, and even today, like, I feel compelled to share it and help. Just your mission, how genuine you are, how there is no BS, like it is what it is, like you really care. And I get it, because I'm one of those people, like, I want to help, I want to share, I want to get the message out. So I just applause to you, because I know it's real, I know it's heart driven, I know it's authentic, and you deserve all the reach that your message can get out there. Let's rewind though, before we go to the list, and stop me if we don't want to go back this far, but I'm just curious if we go back to the moment.
Sure.
And I'm obviously sorry about Chris. I'm sorry about your loss. I know that was a long time ago now. But I'm sure that was an extremely hard thing. I've never lost somebody that close to me, like someone like a best friend, thank God so far. But I'm just curious. So how old were you at that time ish?
I was 25. So and I was in Canada when I found out the news. So I'd finished high school. I'd gone to university. Chris and I Chris didn't go to university, and we'd sort of not fallen out of touch, but we're just much less in touch. But he was always someone I, was very close to, in our high school years. So our sort of lives have gone in different directions. But yeah, so we were 25. So we were 5 years out of school at that point. And I was in Canada and the phone rang in the middle of the night. And that was, of course, when I heard the news. But yeah, so 25.
Yeah. And 25 is such like a pivotal year for, an age for so many people. What was it something you talk about? You had this moment where you questioned everything, go deeper there. Like, was it really was it an instant moment? Was it on the news? Was it days after in reflection? What was that moment, if there was one? Was it like a lightning strike or lightning bolt, or was it like something that evolved? And how did that, can you just describe, like, how did that feel?
Oh, mate, it's such a good question. No, I don't think anyone's asked me that before. So, because you just take on board what everyone says, right? You just go, okay, well, that's a quick little soundbite. But no, the truth is, I got the phone call. I put the phone down. I don't remember I don't remember the majority of the phone call. And then I remember getting a piece of paper and a pen and just doodling like thoughts. So that was just my way of processing what had just happened. And I remember I have the piece of paper somewhere. I remember specifically wondering and writing down what I thought Chris might be, if he was to reflect, what he would think about his life. And as I mentioned, I thought, wow, I think he was really happy. As I kind of looked at my own life at that point, I remember just thinking, well, what could be more important than being happy? Like, what actually could be? Like, of all the emotions we get to experience, what's the overarching one or the underlying one, the through line, however you want to position it. And I just thought, like, genuinely just want to be happy my whole life. And that means a million different things for, everybody, of course. But it was. So you talk about a lightning strike, and it absolutely was. I wrote it down, and I just remember considering at the age of 25, could life be as simple as just doing things that you hope will make you happy, be it business or be it personal or within the community or, any aspect of life. And to me, it was. And so I started writing down this list, and it was kind of like I'm sort of making this up, but I think it might have been like a half an hour process where it might have been an hour where I was writing down this list, and I remember looking at it and I was like, if I'm serious about this, if I actually want to be happy, all I need to do is prioritize this. That's it. And that was a lightning strike. That was a moment. That was that aha moment for me. I just thought, I think living well is as simple as doing the things that you hope are going to make you happy. And that was it. And so in my head, I was convinced that I was going to do my list, and I flew to Las Vegas the next day and married a stranger because that was on my list. And it might have been 2 days later. And that was the very beginning. And there's a lot more to that, of course. But yeah, it was a specific moment. Yeah.
I find that fascinating because, number one, in the personal growth space, and I'm sure a lot of us out there, we've read a lot of books, we've gone to a lot of seminars, we've listened to a lot of audios, and I'm a fan of all of that. I got a giant bookshelf here. I've been down that path for 2 decades now, and I highly advise it. But we hear about everything can change in an instant. Everything can change in a moment. Everything can just change. And so often our own kind of negative self-talk is yeah, right, no way, never happened, not me. So I was curious for you if it was that. And for everybody else that's maybe listening to this or watching this, have you guys had a similar moment? Have you had a lightning strike moment? Have you had a definitive moment? Have you had a defining moment? And I'll share it with you and the reason I asked Sebastian is my story was similar in that it was a defining moment. Although for me, it wasn't as tragic. It wasn't a tragedy. It wasn't a loss. It wasn't an external, maybe something looking at me would be oh, wow, that was it. But the way you describe it gets my, the hair on my arm standing up because it was just as emotional for me. And for me, I was 19 years old. I was working my butt off, following, like you said, following the script as I say it. And I was interning for a district attorney out in Ventura during my summertime. It was my sophomore year of college, sacrificing my summer, filing freaking vanilla folders for this district attorney. I hated all of it. My friends were having fun, right? But I was doing it because I wanted to build the resume, tick the box, right? So I could become a lawyer. And I just had a mentor, someone I respected, just asked me a really simple question, which was why was I doing that? And for me, it was really that moment. It was, I don't know. There's no reason why I'm doing this other than it's what I was supposed to. It's what I was told. It's what my parents wanted. It's what society said. And for me, it was that moment I made a decision. How many of you guys out there watching or listening have had a moment where it's man, all of a sudden, boom, everything changed from a perspective? And then Sebastian, my question for you, and this is kind of the follow-up, because I think a lot of people will go through life where maybe they have a defining decision. But I don't think everybody really makes a decision that they stick to. And I think that's the difference, right? It's the moment where there's awareness, but then that moment has to actually draw a line in the sand, make a decision where there's no turning back. For you, how'd you do that? Because yours was radical. You had a moment, you made a list, and like you said, the next day and then 10 years after, even still today, you've stuck to that decision you made in that moment. I'm curious, what made you stick to that decision? And any advice you'd want to give to other people on maybe they have the awareness, but they haven't had the ability to actually draw a line in the sand. Curious your perspective.
Great. So there's 3 things I want to say, and I'm probably going to forget 2 of them. But to start off with, you're talking about the concept of an environment. It influences us. And so everybody, when you ask that question to your audience, who else has felt that way? Most people, if not everyone, has felt the pressures and the constraints of society, of your family having certain expectations, like the going to school, further education, getting work, accumulating money so that you can buy a house, and not that any of that's wrong, by the way, but it is really important to just not question it, not to be this anti-establishment person or a pain, but just to question it, to make sure that you're on the right track, because we all have the ability to give ourselves permission, this all important word, to change it, So I think that, people out there who might be feeling that they're being influenced, or maybe haven't even thought about it, and then for the first time after your question are going, maybe I am being influenced by something. Well, of course we are. It's our job to work out which is the positive and which is the negative. And remember that we are completely in control and accountable, I think, to move forward. The list itself, as I said, popped up, moving on to my second point, popped up when I was 25. And I went to Canada. I went to Vegas. As I said, I checked off one of the first items on my list was marrying a stranger. which for my bizarre reason, I thought was funny. I thought, why not? It's legal, so I'll try it. But then a part which I don't speak about often is I flew back to Australia and forgot about my list. Not that I forgot about it, but I went back to Australia and I kind of I conformed, basically. I went back and I was like, well, surely I can't just go around checking things from a list. I need to do what convention would suggest as normal, and that is get a job or start a business. And so I started a business with a friend. It was an outdoor movie screen business, like an events company, essentially. It didn't make any money, but that was safety. That was normal. And I went back into that and I forgot about my list entirely for 2.5 years. And it's in my book, I talk about that in depth, but when I do a keynote, it's too much to try and fit in. But anyway, it's not this story of I had a moment, I decided to create a list, and then I changed my life. I had a moment where I forgot about that as well. So I think in The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, that's referred to as there's a call to action and then you refuse. It's a refusal to a call to action. But 10 years on now, obviously a lot's happened, a lot's changed. What's the difference between me and someone else who may have a great list but hasn't done it? Well, it's just action. Yeah. I mean, we can all have lists. That's fantastic. And it's such an important part, but we have to take action. When I teach in a workshop, creating a list and activating a list, they're two separate elements. There's 4 steps to creating a list, as I see it, and there's 4 steps to activating it. And you need to go through all 8 steps to make it happen. And it's a process. It's a simple one in principle, but it might take a big decision at one point. But everyone's capable of it. That's the beauty.
Well, I love that you were willing to share that and be honest, right? So you guys what I'm hearing Sebastian say is, there was a level of awareness shift. There was a defining moment of decision. There was an action taken, but then he got sucked back like we all do. We all get sucked back. And for those of you guys out there that maybe, have moved in a direction, want to move in a direction, but have done the same thing, right? Have had the doubt, have had, an obstacle, have had something that got you off track. Like the difference is not whether we get off track, it's whether we decide to get back on. I think everybody, if they're to be honest, gets off track from time to time. The question is, are you willing to get back on the track? But let's jump to what you were saying, Sebastian, in terms of the list. So, I know what you mean by the list, but give me so what do you mean by the list? Like the philosophy? I know everybody's familiar with like the bucket list term. Are you talking about the same philosophy? Is there something different? Like, how do you define this list of yours?
Well, I've only ever just called it a list. Remember, I didn't think anyone would know about it. So it just is a list. But it's a bucket list, if you will. I don't like the term bucket list. I feel like it's very commercial, and it's also all about death, things to do before you die. Before you die, make sure you do these things. And I feel that's just a little bit fear-driven. Ultimately, this is just about living well. I feel this is a lot deeper than a bucket list. I think the truth of it, whether you call it a bucket list or not, by the way, I don't get annoyed at that. But I think deeper than a bucket list, this is really about permission to live well, a life true to ourselves. I think, by giving yourself permission to consider what you want to do, I think that allows us to grow and I think ultimately connect, with other people, which is fantastic. And you and I are both privileged to be able to connect with lots of people all the time. But in the first place, it's about connecting with yourself. So at surface level, the tip of the iceberg, yes, it's a list and there's very bizarre things in there, from delivering a baby to walking across a country to jumping out of a plane naked, all those things. We all have different versions of lists, but ultimately we just all seek the same thing, and that's to feel good. And that's why lists are different, because we all feel that way through various things. For one person, it's being an adventurer. For one person, it's being a mother. For one other person, it's, whatever it is, starting a podcast.
It's so simple, but so profound. I mean, we make a list. We all make lists for meaningless things every day in our life. The list of things to do today, the list for the grocery store, the list of my projects. We make lists for everything. But most people have never decided to make a list for their life, or a list to be happy, right? Or a list to create meaning, as you put it. And I remember when you said that, that's what struck the chord. And I know I've shared with you, like myself and my business partner, Nick, we've always called it a live list, because we believe it wasn't about a bucket list. It wasn't about dying. It's about living. I didn't want a bunch of stuff that I wait until I'm dead and have regrets that I didn't do. I want a list that I lived, I've read your 100 things. So I know there's a bunch of crazy things on your 100 things. Here, if you're willing to play with me on this, I'm curious, and we'll see if you're going to go with this. So my son Grayson, he's almost 5. He's in preschool. They're doing. He's actually just started going back this week. and he is privileged to be able to go to a preschool where they're actually getting back together. They're doing mass and doing it social distancing, but at least he gets to see his friends. But the parents have to do Zooms. So I hate icebreakers. Like I hate icebreakers. Like whenever you get people together and they do these icebreakers, but they made us the other day all introduce ourselves with 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, good.
So my question for you is, out of your 100 things that you've done, so things you've actually checked off your list, give us 2 truths and a lie, and we're all going to try to guess which one is not true.
Oh, okay. Well, for those of you who know my list, you'll know where I'm lying. But for those of you who don't, I was the first man to break out of San Quentin prison. I hold a Guinness World Record for crushing the most amount of eggs on my big toes in 30 seconds. And what else? I posed nude at an art class in New York. And
that's good. You can stop.
Okay. It's kind of obvious.
Okay. So we'll see. So first one to break out is, what did you say? St. Quentin prison?
Yeah.
Guinness Book of World Record for, what did you say? Crushing what?
Crushing the most amount of eggs on my big toes in 30 seconds.
Okay. And then what was the last one? Nude something?
I was a life art model at a New York art exhibition.
A nude life art model at a New York exhibition. Which one is the lie, everybody? So 2 of them he's done, and 1 of them he hasn't done yet. Which one is the lie?
Get these comments.
I'm gonna say the Guinness Book. I'm gonna say the Guinness Book, just to give something else there, is a lie. Which one would you guys say is the lie out there? Which one's the lie?
Well, Blake, I'm glad you asked. I did pose nude at an art class in New York. It was highly unimpressive. I have been to San Quentin prison, but it was to give a talk. So I did not break out of San Quentin prison. I made it out. And I did hold the Guinness World Record for the most amount of eggs crushed with big toes in 30 seconds.
That is amazing. So, no, thanks for playing with me there. And I did that because I just know there's so many things on your list that are crazy. What would be one that you think was the most random? Like, what was the most crazy, most random out of everything you've checked off your list?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, I threw a dart at a map. 54 was throw a dart at a map and visit the country it lands on. And I had to go to Mongolia. That was quite random. I ended up living with nomadic people in a ger, or a tent, essentially. That was weird. And it was great, by the way. I said yes to everything for a week. Years ago, and that was pretty funny. Nothing happened that I wouldn't share here, but that was, it was kind of out of control, actually. I walked across France. That was really fun. I was in a dance music video clip. I was in a Bollywood film. It goes on. They're all random. I mean, life's random.
Which one were you most genuinely nervous about doing?
I'd say the red carpet. I wanted to get onto a red carpet, but no one knows I'm not wealthy or famous. So I thought, I'm going to crash a red carpet. So I ended up going to the Cannes Film Festival because I have a great red carpet there, and I crashed that carpet. And the way I did it was, I tried everything throughout the day. For those who don't know, the Cannes Film Festival, it's bigger than the Oscars. It's a big celebrity event, entertainment industry, south of France. And tens of thousands of people flock the streets just to see the celebrities as they go in and walk the red carpet to a theatre. And I ended up right there on the edge of the red carpet. I rented a suit for the day. I didn't have any socks on. I was nervous. And after trying a host of things throughout the day, my last option, as I saw it, was to hop under the fence, security and police everywhere, and just pretend I had an invisible earpiece. Well, I pretended it was visible, but it was invisible. And I just walked across the road. And I remember that, in terms of nerves and getting out of my comfort zone, that was frightening. Maybe the most frightening moment of my life. Because I walked halfway across the road and I thought, this is probably not even legal. I'm gonna get wrestled or tasered. And somehow I made it across through, dozens and dozens of security guards. And then the last guy opened up his arm and let me through onto the red carpet. And I was there for half an hour. I even signed autographs. That's always a funny one.
It's fascinating to me. I'm sure your stories go on and on and on and on. Is there one thing you have done? Well, I guess if you could only narrow down to one thing that you have done that you would say you guys got to put this on your list. Like one thing you say, you put this on your list. Is there any one thing that you really share or would really advise people putting on their own list?
Yeah, help someone. By far. And there's kind of two ways of looking at that. One is the most important person on the planet to help is you. So make sure you do something for you. And secondly, once you've done that, help someone else out. It was the most profound thing it changed the trajectory of my life. And that was helping number 26, help a stranger. I know you know this story, but a guy reached out to me and his name was Mark. And, he had a hell of a story. He wanted me to, essentially he said he saw my story and had started a list. And he asked me to shave his head. So I met him, a stranger, shaved his head, but Mark's a quadriplegic. And he was in a wheelchair and he couldn't speak, and his carers were, looking after him and talking on his behalf to me. And I said, what else can I do for you? I can do more than this. And it became apparent because his carers told me that Mark had always wanted to complete a half marathon. And I should also say, for the context, Mark wasn't always a quadriplegic. He was backpacking in, I think it was Italy, in his mid-20s, got bitten by a tick, contracted Lyme's disease, and went from being able-bodied into a quadriplegic very quickly, like in 6 months or something. And and that was his situation, and it's horrible. So anyway, when I said, what else can I do? And his carers told me Mark's always wanted to complete a half marathon. I said, how can I help you do that? Because I had no idea. I wasn't thinking. I just wasn't sure. And Mark looked at me, and he can't really speak, but I understood what he said, and he said, push me. So I pushed him. And it's to this day, the greatest thing I've ever done, the proudest I've ever been about something that I've been involved with. And what's interesting about that too is, I'd never helped anyone before. I'd always been quite, a list should be, I think, made of comprised of things that are, experiences that you haven't had before, right? And but at the beginning of the race, I started with only a few people next to us, and by the end, there were 20 people helping push Mark across the line. And I just saw and realized then and there that we're 100% here on the planet to connect with each other. It starts with connecting with ourselves, but innately people are good, and I see it every single day. People are good. Why are you interviewing me? Because, you think maybe that it will have a positive influence on others, and you're doing me a lovely favor of sharing my story. And it's so nice. It was great to hear from you the other day when you asked. I think people are good, and we want to help other people. We're not quite sure how all the time. And I think it's because we lack opportunity. And so fast forwarding on to an answer of a question you haven't asked me yet. But I think, I do think that, this beautiful ecosystem that's happened from 100 Things, this journey of mine over the last 12 years now, it's kind of spawned this movement of kindness. And, if within that ecosystem, everyone has goals, whether it's jump out of a plane or whether it's I need help rebuilding my house after a fire, they're the same thing. And if you're in an ecosystem of similar-minded people, you'll receive help because we want to help each other out.
I love that. And I share the same belief. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to your story. Is if you want to find a reason to be jaded, you can be jaded. If you want to find a reason to doubt, you can doubt. If you want to find a reason to be negative or hate or have anger, you can. But if you want to find a reason to believe in people, there's a plenty of reasons to believe in people. And, I'm like you, one of those people that I believe people are good. And I saw that with your story, like how it started with the list and, a lot of adventure and some crazy things, but it really became something more. It became about making an impact, about, acts of kindness, about service. Why do you think those two things are so intertwined? Like, why are those linked? Do you think that's just your story? Or do you think for everybody, like our list is linked to contribution or kindness? I'm curious your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a story arc that everyone shares. If you listen to, there are so many people out there who've done incredible things with their lives. And when they recount their life story, you'll often hear that it was about themselves. They did something, whatever it was, far more impressive than crashing a red carpet usually. And then they tell the story, then they realized there was something bigger than themselves. There was an impact of sorts, referring back to the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's model. You return home having gone out of your comfort zone and discovered stuff about yourself, and you share it with people. So I think that, yes, I'm a romantic at heart, but I do believe that we go out there, we learn, we try, we experience, we receive, so that we can give. And I think ultimately, this is an interesting one, and I'd almost like your perspective on this. I often talk about this analogy. If you get onto a plane and they say oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling, put yours on first before helping others. Now, I've said that. I use it in my keynotes all the time, and it's a really interesting concept, and it's I love it. You have to be safe. You have to have your own supply, your own resource of whatever's important to you to live well, so that you can then help others. But the only fault with that, I think, is that it suggests that you look after yourself, and then in a linear way, you then look after someone else, and that's the story. But I kind of think now, and it's more of a recent thought, that it's actually a little deeper than that, because you have to bounce between the two quite often. It's not about just yourself. Okay, I'm perfect. I'm going to go and help others. You have to always look back at yourself. And at times you need to be selfish, and at other times you need to be selfless. And as long as you're aware that there are two sort of, it's a double-edged sword, a beautiful one too. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor, but yeah, do you feel the same? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting philosophy. I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it that way, but the way you framed it, I'd agree. I'd agree it's both directional, right? So,
yeah.
I don't think you can give what you don't have. I don't think you can pour from an empty cup. I'm a huge believer in like self-love and making sure you take care of yourself so you can give. But I do agree that it's not linear, right? Because, let's be honest, like when you give, it's not just the receiver that's getting, right? When you give, when all of us give, like we all feel amazing, right? So yeah, I think you're spot on. I think you can get yourself in a place where you can give, but I also think motion creates motion. If you give regardless, that is actually going to give you energy in return. So yeah, I've never put it that way, but I think you're spot on.
Thank God.
And I'm watching the comment thread, light up. Everybody's like, yeah, giving's where it's at. Live to give, service. Probably now, now more than ever. I'm curious, Sebastian, have you seen any of your kind of philosophies, your mindset, your teaching shift during pandemic, like during this, this year? Like there's a lot of just obvious stuff, like we can't maybe go travel to check something off their list, or we can't do things in physical proximity. I'm curious if your philosophy still applies, or if the approach is different, or what you're seeing maybe that is having to be adapted or adjusted now.
Yeah, I don't think a philosophy of mine's changed. If I have a philosophy, by the way, does that make me a philosopher?
If you believe so, I think it does.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. No, I don't think so. I think, as you say, the environment has changed. We can't travel, we can't socialize like we once have, all these things. But I mean, the bedrock of a meaningful list is understanding our values. We understand as an individual or as a family or as a friendship circle or as a business or a brand or an industry, continue on and on and on. If we understand what our values are, we base goals on those. So the goals, again, to use the iceberg analogy, they're just the tip. They're the tip of the iceberg. So, backpacking through Europe, sure, that's great. But the bedrock of that decision or that goal is, adventure or exploration. And so in a time where we can't backpack through Europe, it doesn't mean that you can no longer activate that pillar or that spoke, if you will, that value. You just have to do it in a different way. So goals absolutely need to change. It's like water in a cup. It just molds to whatever environment it's allowed to, but it's still water. So I feel that, as opposed to skydiving or climbing a mountain, we can remodel the backyard, or we can start a viral campaign of some sort. I mean, we've seen, for example, this is a funny example. We're agreed that everyone wants to be kind to one another, right? Community as well is something that's been impacted. We can't physically catch up with, well, I live in LA, so I mean, that doesn't seem true over here, but like, you're not meant to be catching up with people. And long story short, we started finding out there were a lot of people celebrating birthdays alone in isolation. And so on one occasion, Toddy, who I work with, said, hey, we should just throw a surprise birthday party for this stranger over here. They were nominated by their brother or something like that. And so we said, okay, so we put a call out and said, who wants to join a Zoom call for someone's birthday? And we're going to sing a song. We're going to have a dance to one song, and we're all going to say something nice about that person. And, the first call, I think 15 people turned up from all over the world. And on one of our last calls, 99 people turned up to celebrate the 99th birthday of a lady called Louise, who was nominated by her son, Chris. So it just goes to show that, to reflect on your question, yes, we couldn't turn up to a physical birthday party, but through humans being creative and resilient and driven, we'll find a way to, ideally you can find a way to activate that same value. And so it was done virtually. So yeah, goals change, but values don't.
I love your creativity, man. You take a pure heart, you add creativity, you apply action, and you just do cool stuff. I love it. You said two big kind of concepts there, though, that I actually want to unpack. So the idea of a goal being the tip of the iceberg, as you say, to a value.
Yes.
I've never heard it put that way, but it makes a lot of sense. I've heard, show me where your time is spent and your money is spent, and I'll show you what's important to you, right? It's kind of like an old thing. Show me your credit card statement and your calendar, and I'll show you what you value. But I've never heard it saying like, look, if you really make a list of your goals, what you want, it's really going to highlight at the underneath it, the values, which is more important, which sounds so obvious, but I'm curious, like, is there, other than just, well, what do you value? Is there like a method that you use? Like if I were to write 10 goals or 100 goals or 50 goals, like how would I try to understand my personal values if I've never done that exercise?
If I was to teach the 4 steps of creating a list, the first step is permission. I think it's a hugely important word. I think about it and talk about it a lot. This idea that often we have to find permission elsewhere to do something. And that's not the truth. We can all give ourselves permission. Usually, and using my story as an example, it comes after a dark moment. And those are the people that we hear give themselves permission to live differently. Someone almost died. They're diagnosed with terminal illness and they suddenly go, oh, hang on. I almost died. Jesus, what do I want to do? And they go and do it. They just gave themselves permission, and anyone can do that. You don't have to wait for a bad moment. Step 1. Step 2 is reflection. I think you don't know, you can't change your past, but it's equally as important to know what it is, because if you understand how you got to where you are, it just gives you a solid footing for moving forward. And you can assess whether you're in the right direction or whether you need to tweak it. So that's step 2, reflection. Step 3 is kind of this area of values. The way, again, I would talk about it or teach it is, we've all done values tests, I think. Usually they're professional. But if you can, you can Google values, personal values, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. If you just grab the ones that represent you or the ones you would like to represent you, you might end up with, for argument's sake, 50. And then you streamline those, you cluster the similar ones. So I always use this example, but like adventure, liberation, freedom, the idea of breaking the shackle, they're all pretty similar. So if you are able to whittle down 50 values into maybe a list of 10, what I would then call spokes, and I'll explain why I say spokes. I teach this method of a wheel of life. If you imagine a bicycle wheel, the spokes of the wheel give the wheel structure and strength. And I think in a similar way, if you look at that wheel as your life, the values, your clustered values, your group values are the spokes. So if you identify what your important spokes are in your life, and a lot of them are, very common ones like family or love or adventure or education, but they don't have to be. They could be anything. You understand what all those are, and then you're honest with yourself and you think, well, which ones am I actually honoring and which ones am I not? That's where you start to find where your weaknesses are in your wheel. And that's a beautiful opportunity to go, I haven't been valuing connection. I'm going to call 3 of my friends. I'm going to organize a dinner. I'm going to catch up with my mum. So that's how I would teach it. So yeah, to answer your question in a very long way, how do you understand your values? Well, just look at values to begin with, and then just see which ones apply to you. Try and get it in a form, and then see which ones you can actually improve upon.
No, I mean, I love you going into it. You make it sound so simple, but it's seriously profound. Like, I think there's a lot of people that if they feel out of alignment, right, it might be a physical feeling. It might, transcend into unhappiness or depression or anxiety or all these things we call it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably because you're living out of alignment with your values, right? Maybe your values are not getting fulfilled in the actions you have, the life that you're doing, or maybe the life that you have and the actions you're doing are against or in conflict of your personal value system. And I think that's a lot of the physical feeling that maybe a lot of people go through. But you make it simple, right? For all of us, and I'm going to do this, I'm taking notes. Like, we should all have a list. We should have a list of things that we believe we should create for our life. But even during this time, even though we can't maybe do all of the things on the list, let's take Sebastian's advice and let's unpack, well, what's the underlying value of why we want to do that? And how can we accomplish that value within what is in our control, what's within our reach today? I mean, I think it's brilliant. Like you're doing in your life and for people every single day with your examples. And I think I did go through your website and I saw your social media earlier week. For those that like structure, because I know there's a lot of people like me that maybe want, here's the structure, here's the format, here's the steps. Did I see that you have a new online course that kind of walks people through how to make the list, and people can find that on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually brand new. I've been doing, again, the whole thing wasn't planned. I found myself speaking on stages all around the world. I'm not even making that up. For all industries, all businesses, blah, 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 talking about purpose and connection and happiness and how to create a list. And then I used to get a ton of questions. How do you do this? How do you do this? I don't know how to start. I know what I want to do, but I don't know this. And so I just started answering all these emails or questions directly. And I thought, I'm just going to put a course together. And so it's taken realistically 6 years to get to a point where this last week we just launched it. And so, yeah, you can go to the website, 100things.com, and you'll see a little tab for 100 Things online course. And there's an 8-step process to creating and activating your ultimate list. And it's modulated. There's video lessons. There's challenges to get you out of the chair, to get you out of your comfort zone, which I think is such an important thing. And then we have 2 bi-weekly Zoom calls over the period of a month with me and Toddy, who I work with, and we form an accountability group for those people. So it's fresh, and I think it's powerful.
I love it. Well, I definitely wanted to give it a plug. I did notice that. And I know there's probably people that would love a framework. I read the book when we first met. So when I first found your ESPN story, I ordered the book off Amazon. I know this goes through a lot of the first generation principles, and it's definitely a great read for how to make a list. And I'm sure the web program takes it to a whole new level. If you mind, I'd love to go into maybe one more concept while we got a few minutes, because this fascinates me, because you told the story of the virtual birthday and the surprise birthday, which I love. How many of you guys out there are going to go throw a surprise virtual birthday for somebody, just because it sounds like an amazing thing to do? But I think you're touching on even a deeper concept, and I'm curious your opinion.
Yeah.
It seems like so many of the things that are on our list, so many of the things that make us, happy or have meaning or create fulfillment, or we talk about service and giving back. It seems like just connection, whatever you want to call it, connection, relationship, community, whatever term you want to use, is kind of at the forefront of a lot of this. And I'm just curious your philosophy on what's going on right now, because here's the way I look at it. I think it's just super weird. Like back when we first met a couple years ago, we were at an event. I think I was even talking about the concept of how then we were so more connected than ever before, meaning we're so connected via social media, Instagram, Zoom, technology had us so connected. But I was like, but we're so disconnected, and this was 3 years ago. We're more connected than ever before, but we feel more disconnected. And now I feel that we're being forced to disconnect physically because of the whole COVID pandemic. And now people are like, because we're forced to disconnect, people are like realizing the importance of reconnection. So I'm curious, just what you're seeing out there, what you're feeling, what you're doing when it comes to just our human need to get together, and especially now more than ever.
Geez, that's such an interesting, I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. We're realizing that connection is important. Having said that, just an aside, I think it's funny, like a lot of the briefs I get now for keynotes, virtual keynotes, we want you to come in because everyone feels disengaged. And I see that businesses, this is just as a trend, this is a general comment, businesses are trying to put on as much virtual content as possible for their staff, to the point now where it's annoying. There's so much stuff, and staff are just like, oh my God, another Zoom call. And it takes away from productivity. I just popped in my head. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I think you're right. I think ultimately as people, it's so important, and it's such an overused term, but connection is crucial. We want to be heard, we want to be seen, and we want to, we want to feel that, whether it's romantically or whether it's, whatever it is, professionally, personally. I think that the virtual, like the advent of this virtual place that we're now in, and there's obviously a lot of conjecture over, will it stop, will it end, what does this mean for everyone? I think it has been really, really lovely. I think you can still connect in a different way, but that's important. I think, like you mentioned social media before. I think you mentioned social media. Maybe I thought about it, but that's like did you mention it?
Yeah, because that's what I felt. I felt like we had the ability to connect. We were more connected, but we were disconnected, and now we are disconnected, and now we're like reconnecting. I could be sounding crazy, but that's just what I'm feeling.
I know, I agree with you, and I heard this quote recently, and I'm still trying to work it out, but I really like it, and if someone could tell me who said this, it'd be great. I think it might be Rumi. And it was, I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. And I guess the idea is no one's being present. They're just purely, this is a generalization, but a lot of us, certainly in social media promotes this, is we worry about what we think others think about us. And so we generate all our actions around this idea of, I want to come across as this so that someone might think something about me. And it takes us away from being ourselves. And that in essence is exactly why I agree that, we were becoming very, very disconnected. But I mean, sort of relaying this back to a list, everyone wants to feel connected, and everyone, including me, often is kind of, you're not honoring that. When I did my list, so I've got 24 items left on my list. It's published in a book, so I can't change that, but our list should change because our values change over life. So I'm in the process of redoing the last 24, and connection is an important piece to me. And there are times when I think about connection. If I do a workshop, this will happen all the time. I'll say to a group, right, put down your spokes for your wheel of life. Everyone will put down connection or friendship or family or something like that. And I'll say, can you highlight that? Can you highlight that spoke to say, I'm honoring that. I'm doing everything I can to promote connection in some way, shape or form. And most people will say no. And therefore, how do you fix it? Well, the answers are simple. Call my mum, email friends, organize a dinner, organize a virtual dinner. We've all been doing these virtual dinners over the 6 months. So it's a very common one. And just to go off on another tangent, no one highlights all their spokes. It's impossible. It's very hard to be like activating all your ideals at once. I mean, life just is life at times and you can't. So it's a matter of spinning plates. Sometimes you need to direct all your energy onto one spoke, and other times you need to go onto the other. As long as you know how many you've got and what they are, you can kind of work on different ones at different times.
I love it. I'm loving this conversation. There's just so much value that I think is relevant at any time in our life, but I think it's more relevant even right now. It's just where the world's at and what the world needs. And I love the example you're setting and just what you're doing for people. You're making a difference. So I know for people that want to find out more, you got the podcast. So congrats on the new podcast. So
we
100
million views the other day.
That's huge. I mean, that's huge. It's brand new, pretty new, right?
Oh, I'm completely lying. I think I've got a couple of friends who listen. It's fun though. But thank you.
I believe you, man. It deserves 1 million views. So, guys, 100 Things podcast. You can dive into that. Obviously, you can find Sebastian Terry online, 100things.com. Check out the online course we were just talking about. If you need, the first steps, you want some structure, you want to make a list. I noticed on your website, you're doing these fireside chats as well. Can you maybe elaborate, what that's all about? What inspired that? Yeah.
So, we see so many people's lists, obviously, on the site. We're actually redoing the site soon to really amplify the community aspect of it. But there are a lot of common things like being a pilot, falling in love, completing a marathon, being an actor, writing a script, all those things. So we found kind of experts in those particular areas, and we just interview them about, well, how did you do it? And what are your tips to people who have that on their list too? And so they're kind of like a how to become a whatever. And they're really interesting. So they're kind of more educational. So we've done, I think, 11 so far. The last one the one we're releasing next week will be how to become a stunt person. We've interviewed this lady called Heidi, who's an incredible stunt person in LA, here in Hollywood. So they're kind of informative. I married a stranger one time, and now we end up in a place where we're helping people and educating and connecting and doing all these lovely things. And I read a stat I want to share with you before we go. If you write down a goal, the simple act of writing a goal makes you 42% more likely to achieve it. So I can't see any of the comments here, but I urge people who are listening and are engaging with your social, write down your goal, because by doing so, not only will you kind of become 42% more likely to do it, which is incredible. Like if someone said, here, take a pill and you'll be 42% more likely to do something, you take it, but you don't have to. All you have to do is write it down. Someone will probably read it and say, I can help you do that, or I want to do that too. So it's an amazing place for connection.
You guys, I heard Sebastian just give everybody a challenge. What's one goal that's important to you right now, right? Let's start the list. Let's all start our list right now with at least one. What's one thing you want to put on your list, you want to achieve, you want to do, you want to go, you want to serve, something you want to do in the pursuit of your potential, your happiness, service. So what's one? And obviously don't stop at one. Hopefully this conversation inspires to make the list, figure out what we value, live by example. And before we round out, Sebastian, yours has been great. And I would love to continue the conversation, maybe do some more in the future because, I think people are getting a ton of value. But let me ask you, if you got a couple minutes, can I fire a couple more questions before we round out?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. And you mentioned earlier, I know, you said you've seen my TED Talk, so you understand my kind of personal philosophy around like the script. And I shared my story at the beginning. And by script, it's just an analogy where it's like the story we tell ourselves, the belief system we have. I'm curious for you in your life, was there a script you had to shift? You went from telling yourself one thing that kept you capped, right, or limited, that you had to make the shift, right, and it opened everything up. Can you think of what one shift you made that had a big impact in your life and maybe what that would be?
Well, I think, look, I mean, to your point, I can actually see now people sharing their lists, right? And what they're doing is they're being proactive. They're taking action. And until you take action, nothing changes. It's great to hopefully listen to this conversation and learn. But unless you do something with it, nothing happens. So the biggest shift in my life was I finally just did something. And I listened to myself. I listened to something that was only a feeling, and I thought I should really do something about that. And many times before I hadn't. If you think of a triangle, right, at the top of the triangle is belief. And then if you go down here, you have action, and then you have results. And you think of it as a flow. Your belief will heavily impact your action. Your action will, of course, heavily impact your results. And your result will, in fact, then go and strengthen your previous belief. So if you think of someone who's negative, as I was, and I never tried anything, I didn't believe the world was great, I didn't believe I was great, my actions reflected that. I was insular, I was shut off, I didn't smile, and my result was I didn't meet anyone, I didn't do anything, and I went home and I slept that night, and I was like, oh, I was right, the world isn't great, and I'd go back to bed, and you reinforce it. So I just simply, to use that model on my life, at one point, after my friend had passed away, Chris, and after I'd written a list, I still couldn't change my belief instantly. The world's suddenly kind and I'm capable of everything. But the one thing I could change was my action. And so I just took action. And that was, as I mentioned, I flew to Las Vegas. So that was where I flipped the script, because we're told, environmentally, we're told things. And of course we absorb that from a young age. And so our script is something that we think is real. And it's not necessarily. It's always time to question it. It's never too late. You get people who I engage, like this workshop, for example, this first month, we've just done this competition. We're going to take on 10 people for free. There's a 21-year-old who's entered, and there's a 60-year-old. And I just looked at that yesterday for the data. And it's just interesting. It's never too late. We all have ambition. We all have brains to think and to conjure up thought. We all have opportunity to make a change. And yes, the playing field isn't always equal, but there is always an opportunity. And if you focus on that, more of that opportunity will come.
I love that. Very well said. And kind of a follow-up question. This will be a fun one. So you're God for a day. You're the Almighty. You have all power. You have the ability in one instance right now to automatically shift a script in everybody's mind on planet Earth. Every human being walking on this planet, you can instantly have them go from telling themselves one thing to telling themselves something different, from having one negative thought to having a new thought. If you had that power right now to immediately insert that shift to everybody, what would you wish on them?
Well, they need to buy my book. So, I'm obviously joking. Feel free if you want. I would just say, look, this is something I think about quite a bit. Imagine being on your deathbed, looking back at your life, and in your final moment of reflection on your whole life, as it just flashed before you quickly, you thought, shit, I wish I did that differently. Imagine that. How do you change that? Right now in this moment, you change that with your decisions from this moment. And I can see people are sharing their goals, which is amazing. Do something about it. Take action. And so that would be it. Because we all have the tools. We all have the capability. We don't need a magical occurrence to happen. We just need to take ownership. We are accountable. We have the power of choice. So I think for anyone listening who's, might feel nervous or they might doubt or whatever, just try one thing, a simple thing, and don't be scared.
I love it. And I'm just curious, you live that life, you are that example. and you're obviously on a mission helping people, in my opinion, like feel more alive every single day. What do you think some of the key secrets are, the key trends, the key things, like for someone really to feel alive while we're spending our time on this planet? Like, what makes you feel alive? What do you see in others? What insight would you give if we want that feeling?
Well, okay. So this is what I think. See, only because you asked. So I'm celebrated for ticking off, checking things on my list, right? ESPN, blah, 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 whatever. And it's odd, right? It's kind of odd because like if an alien, if I'm giving a keynote to 1,000 people and let's just say an alien flew down to the back of the room and they said to the guy at the back, what's this guy talking about? Because everyone's really into it. And the guy was like, oh, he's just talking about things that make him happy and he's doing them. And the alien would say, what, is that not what everyone's doing? What do you mean? Is he the only person doing things that make him happy? So it's ridiculous. So I'm celebrated for doing things that make me happy. So that's odd to begin with, which seems a bit of a tangent, but maybe it is. I think that truly we're not defined by what we do. We're not defined by the things I'm not defined by the things I've done. I crushed eggs on my big toes. Hopefully that doesn't define me. All I think a list is ultimately, and I've learned this retrospectively, is that it's purely a vehicle for us to get closer to trying to be ourselves. I think the secret to living a happy life is understanding who you are. And if you can get close to that, and I think it's an ongoing lifelong mission, I think if you can get close to learning who you are, and then you can practice being that in every aspect of your life, be it a job. Like, look, I'm sat on the floor here. Like, I'm sat on the floor, highly unprofessional. I've got a green screen here. I've got all these lights over here. I could have set this up and made it look really good, but it's not me. Unless I'm, getting paid lots of money from a professional outfit and they insist, I'll do it. But my point is, be yourself, be authentic, whatever that is. We're all different, and you'll be happier on your deathbed if you understand on your moment of reflection that you've just been yourself. So yeah, create a list that allows you to get closer to that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You want to find more information on everything we're talking about today and more. You can learn more about Sebastian, his work, his mission, his movement, 100things.com. I'll put the link in the feed. Obviously, check out the podcast, right? The 100 Things podcast. I recommend the TED Talk. If you just Google his name and TED Talk, it's definitely worth the time. And goes into a little deeper on some of the things we talked about here today. Pick up the book on Amazon. So very, very great read. And if you got value, let Sebastian know. I tagged him in my story. You can find him on Instagram, Seb 100 Things. So SEB 100 Things is the handle. And obviously on his website, we mentioned the course. And Sebastian, I appreciate you, brother. I just appreciate who you are as a person, what you're doing. I know it's real. I know it's genuine, and that's why it's working for you. And beyond just you, I know it's about all the people you're touching, you're inspiring, and the impact that you're making. You're making your dent, with your time out here. And, I appreciate you. I guess before we round out, you've been gracious with your time. Any closing thoughts, anything else you want to share on your mind or your heart before we round out tonight's conversation?
Well, I want to say thank you. It was really fun. I love talking about this stuff, and I do really appreciate opportunity. I think I've said as much as, I think would be helpful. I could try and ramble on, but, people listening, ask yourself a question. One simple question. It's just what's on your list. Because if you give that question true consideration, it has the potential to not just drastically impact your life in a positive way, but impact the lives of people you may not have even met yet. And that's a question worth asking. So, at the end of this, when we go off and the interview's finished, don't go and scroll to the next thing in Facebook. Give yourself a moment, just 30 seconds to consider what's on your list. What would you love to do? I tell you what I'm not going to do again, wear a light grey T-shirt on an interview. I mean, can you see my sweaty, that's ridiculous.
Hey, no better way to close out a conversation than that. Sebastian, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your time. And again, check everything out. If you got value from Sebastian, shoot him a message, shoot him a DM, give him a tag, and send some gratitude for the time you shared with all of us tonight. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, and I'll continue to support any way I can. Love the mission you're on. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference, and thanks for the time tonight.
You're the best. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Send me your lists.
What's on your list? Thanks, everybody. Hey guys, one last thing. I'm super excited that this new podcast, Alive by Design, just went live. You see, I designed the show to bring you inspired thoughts and fascinating conversations with the world's most impactful people, to provide transformative principles and practices to help you wake up, move toward your meant to, and feel fully alive. And I'd love for you to help me spread the word now. Simply subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on this platform right now. So if I've ever given you value, please do me this personal favor and go subscribe now. And if you found today's episode helpful in any way, make sure you share this with at least one friend today. You have the power right now to change someone's day. So send them a text message with a link to alivebydesign.com, or simply copy and paste the link right from this podcast platform. Who's one person you know right now that you want to see succeed, that you want to see grow, that you want to see feel more alive? Shoot them a text with your largest takeaway from today and be a light in their day. And if you were referred here by a friend, make sure you shoot them a text back and say thank you. I'd love to hear from you directly on what you got from today's podcast. So if you're up for it, drop by my Instagram @BlakeMalin and shoot me a DM. And as always, thank you for showing up. I'm grateful for you. And I hope our time together today in some small way helped you feel a little more alive. Until next time.